A type of stereotype, a particular type of stereotype which I mentioned earlier, is still existing in the Indian Indian media scenario. That is, women are always represented in a particular role, whereas men are represented in another particular role. So the audience interprets, the audience understands, or they misconcepts these representations as true, as reality, and their behaviors, their lifestyle attitudes will also become similar or being imitated to what is being produced by the media bodies. So in Indian film industry, for example, there has been the representation of female characters as inferiors or powerless people, whereas the male characters are being represented as powerful, or as the community who has a high value or high role in both political and cultural scenarios of the community. Those such representation, those such stereotyping have been blurring, have been changing in nowadays, thanks to the advent of many changes, many revolutionary writers, filmmakers in our community. So, although a change happens, there exists a definite type of stereotyping of men and women in Indian film industry that is still evident in many of the movies. Narrative in media theory. So what is narrative? The narrative refers to the structured sequence of events that constructs the plot and conveys information to the audience. So for example, in a movie, the story is the narrative in a nutshell. So what happens in a story? How is the story going on? How is the story being framed? How is it constructed? How it begins? How it goes? How it ends? And what are the messages being conveyed? All these important elements have been created from the narrative, through the narrative of the particular media that we create. So media narrative utilize many audio as well as visual codes to effectively implement its story output to the audience. The codes like dialogue, sound system, sound effects, music, and also the visual codes like camera work, editing, graphics. So all these elements engage the viewer or the reader of a media. Take the case of a news channel, a BBC news channel at the 10 a.m. So the BBC news that being telecasted at 10 a.m. or a particular time of a day, it uses the same platform, the same studio platform, the same technique of coding, the same technique of narration, the same style of storytelling or the news reporting. So the audience have an expectation that whenever they start to watch a news hour of a BBC channel at a particular time, they have an expectation that the news would be constructed, the news would be flowing in this manner or in that style. So when it aligns their expectations, it influences them. It influences their ability to interpret the news, to understand the news. So that's the power of narrative when it comes to media. So the unit discusses two types of narratives. One is the linear narrative, another one is a non-linear narratives. So most of our media texts, our media products they follow the linear narrative form. So in the linear narrative form, it has many elements that the unit discusses. The first one is equilibrium. Equilibrium, it means the narrative begins by establishing a normal setting, a normal state of affairs or balance in the story world. Then comes the disruption. So in an equilibrium state of affairs in a story, a disruption, for example, a faulty moment for a protagonist or for a hero happens. So it compels the characters enter into a scene that upset the natural flow of the state. It creates a sense of horror, a sense of fear, a sense of disturbance. Then comes the cost or the struggle element. So after the disruption happens, after the problem arises, the narrator or the protagonist or the hero or the heroine of the movie, for example, she struggles to find out an answer for her problems, or she struggles to resolve her problems. This is for her cost. This is her cost throughout the movie, for example. So her journey is to resolve the problem. Her cost in her life is to resolve the problem that she met in the middle of her life. And the next element of that media product, that narrative model, is a climax. So the narrative trajectory builds toward an explosive and a gripping climax. So many conflicting elements are being gathered, are being accumulated into the final part of that video or media product. So after the climax, there happens resolution. So after the climax, when every cost, when every struggle of a hero, for example, have been resolved, there happened a resolution for that narrative. So this is the type of a linear narrative model of creating a text or creating a video. So many popular TV shows employs these techniques. Take the case of Sherlock Holmes series. What happens in the Sherlock Holmes series? So in this series, each episode begins with the protagonist or the main character Sherlock and his assistant Watson in a normal situation. Then a problem arises. That is the disruption. Then they envisage the methods, the techniques, the investigative forms to resolve the problem. That is the cost. That is the struggle. Then comes a climax. They find a resolution. They find a solution for the problem. That is the climax. And after that comes the happy ending of the story. That is the resolution. So most of the narratives, maybe video or the textual narratives, employs this technique of linear narrative, while some others uses unorganized, non-linear techniques to tell a story, to narrate a movie story. So in the narratives, so many techniques and conventions have been used to give the visual and give the textual and auditory effects to the audience. It uses the flashback elements in the story. So while you insert the scenes that depict the events taking place earlier in the story to provide the important backstory or the context about their characters, past events, their memories, that gives an effect for the audience, that gives a relevance to the main narrative thrust or the body part of the story. The another technique convention being followed while narrating a story is point of view shots. So the camera takes the literal viewpoint of a particular character to immerse the audience into their subjective experience. So, for example, the horror films often use these point of view shots of villain to make viewers uncomfortable, to make them distracted, to make them disturbed. The another technique convention being followed in the narrative platform is the impossible camera positions, using special rigs and technology to capture shots from different angles, different heights, different vantage points that would normally be impossible to achieve. For example, the underwater shots, the aerial shots. So normally this would be impossible to achieve, but still they use it to give special effects to the story or to the movie part. Another convention is privileged spectator's position. So positioning camera or the viewer's perspective to make the certain information visible that the other characters in the scene are not aware or that they cannot see or they cannot experience. It is for the intention of enhancing the knowledge of the audience who are watching this movie or who are reading this story. That is the privileged spectator position. Similarly, the conventional techniques of narratives are, another conventional techniques of narratives are voiceovers of the characters, enigma codes. What are the enigma codes? It gives some suspense. It does not fully reveals what is happening in the story. It keeps some information hidden from the audience to keep them engaged throughout the story, to keep them anxious. What is happening next? What is happening next? So it gives the mystery. It gives many unanswered questions to remain the audience, to make the audience engaged in decoding the untold parts of the story. Action codes showing certain specific actions by the characters. It will serve as visual cues, the hint at the cause and effect events that will occur later in the narrative, setting up the future payoff and outcomes of the story. So these are some of the techniques and conventions being followed to create a narrative. Codes. So the codes in media theories refer to the technical, written, and symbolic tools used to construct or suggest meaning in media forms and products. So the media codes include elements like the use of camera, acting, setting, editing, lighting, sound, special effects, typography, color, visual representations, etc. All of them give some special effects in the final output of a video product or a textual product. So these codes allow the creators to communicate ideas, emotions, narratives through the various media platforms, whether it is a film, it is a television, it is a news value item, or any other digital media item. So when it comes to camera selection, camera techniques, you have so many techniques to use as your code. You have short selection, you have close-up selection, you have medium shots, you have long shots. All of them brings the various types of effects in the final outputs of a media products. The next, acting performance give some codes. your body language, how do you sit, how do you speak, how do you behave, how do you move throughout the uh, plot, all of them carries a special meaning, a special understanding towards the audience through these types of chords. Another one is your facial expression, your tone of voice. All of them establishes some special conventional meaning to the audience. The time periods, the context. Is it a historical movie? When is it? Where is the story happening? Is it happening in some other continent of the world? Some other hinterlands of the world? So all of them are the chords. All of them are represented as the chords that creates double meaning or many meanings to the final output of a media product. So in the unit, you have a special section of Roland Barthes 5 chords. This can be effectively used in your media theory studies. What are the 5 chords suggested by or proposed by Roland Barthes in the techniques of narratives? So in his seminal work SZ, Roland Barthes introduced 5 narrative chords. The first one is hermeneutic chord. Hermeneutic chord, by which we mean the writers or the authors create a sense of anticipation and curiosity. A kind of curiosity compelling the audience to speculate, to anticipate, to formulate of their own interpretations until the truth is fully or finally unveiled or revealed. So many movies use this technique of hermeneutic chord. So withholding so many informations to give the audience a suspenseful feeling or a thrilling experience. And finally, they compare their expectations with what happens in reality in the movie or in the text. Another chord that Barthes envisages is proerotic chord. It's an action-packed moments that propel the narrative, such as intense fight scene. So this intense fight scene gives so many chords, so many meaning, so many interpretations in the plot forward. Another chord is semantic chord. We find subtle connotations and so many flickers of meaning in that add depth, that add value, that add some double meaning to the characters, to the setting, to the plot of the media product, which is known as semantic chord. The symbols or the non-verbal meaning, the non-verbal communications, all of them are the part of semantic chord. And the final chord that Barthes discusses is a cultural chord. So the video creators, the video producers, or the textual authors try to imbibe some cultural effects, some traditional effects, for example, into the plot, into the narrative that they create, that structure, that gives the audience or the readers an extra understanding, an extra knowledge of in which society they live in, what are the type of culture, what are the type of living style which they follow. All of them are conveyed to the audience through these cultural code, cultural settings. In the part, the theories of production of this unit, it discusses the relationship between the reality and the media, as well as how the media production examines, the theories of media production examines how and why that content, a particular content, takes the shape that it does. So a central premise is that the media content provides a portrayal or the map of the world that differs in a systematic ways from the reality itself. Do you think that's all that being portrayed in the media are the realistic reflection of the physical world that it tries to portray? No way. There are some medias that it exactly portrays, but in many cases, in most of the case, the reality of the world that a media represents is entirely different from what it looks like. So this raises the questions and the concept like biases, the accuracy, the balance, and the neutrality, all of which imply assessing and measuring how well the media representations correspond to some external benchmark or standard of reality. So there are so many arguments, so many concepts, so many theories that is related to the media reality representations. And one of the important theory that exists in this scenario is the propaganda model envisaged by Noam Chomsky. The propaganda model argues that after going through filters like advertising, ownership, official sources, media end up representing a narrow range of views that favor powerful and some elite community or the corporate interest. So, when we say it in a more simplified tone, most of the news media, for example, have been owned by some corporate group or some politically affiliated group or some other group who have some special vested interest. So when these media companies produce news value items through their media channels, it filters, it represents, and it edits the news value items in a way that satisfy their intention, their objectives, not the intention and not the commitment that they take to the audience of a news corporate. So portraying media simply as a propaganda model is oversimplification. I'm not saying that all media have carried that propaganda, all media have that filtering and blurring the content in a way that it satisfies their end. But according to our experience, especially in our current political scenario, media has a power to convey to the audience what it likes to convey to the audience. Media has the power to create a reality among the audience by its own choices, by its own manipulations, by its own vested agendas. So, media outputs emerge from complex, dynamic constraints. Although there are so many hidden agenda, there are so many hidden propaganda that so many news corporates carry for their news values items in their news productions. I'm not oversimplifying that the media propaganda corrupts the media world. There are so many good channels, there are so many good corporates that they wish to run the media items, they run the media productions in a very balanced, in a very systematic, and in a style that the audience wants to know what is happening in the reality. So Media acts as a democratic watchdog. The media has a power to a great power to influence the political scenario of the world. That is why you might see that most of the elite corporates, most of the political organizations, they have a special kind of consideration. They have a special kinds of affiliations to many news value corporations, to many news producers. So media functions as a watchdog of a democracy. For example, take the case of India, showing their intricate relationship with power structures. So there are so many elements that influence the news productions in the propaganda system. For example, the individuals who work in a news room, the routines of a news media organization, the organizational structure, the extra media influences, for example, from politics, economics, the ideological affiliations of news corporations. All of these influence the final output of a media newsroom.